if you look backwards at all of these steps, all of these beginnings, they are all a counterbalance to fear. The word cancer brings that to so many people, even those that don't have it but hear it. You could see it on their faces. And again, by the grace of God, that isn't what came to my friends' faces, but it was, I want to help. What can I do? I will laugh with you, even if I'm a little uncomfortable. Dr. Speckert, right before I started on the treatments, he had said that he found that the patients who were the least anxious did the best. And I just used that as my rallying cry. Least anxious, least anxious. Well, if it's the least anxious, I am going to be the leastest anxiousest of anybody he's ever seen. After my surgery, it was about the same time that the Unabomber had been discovered living in Montana and had been arrested and taken off to some facility, and of course had been quite a topic of conversation and news and whatnot. And so a group of friends were at my house, and we were talking and laughing and telling jokes and making merry, I suppose is how you would describe it, when one friend said, "I've got it! I've got it! I know what we could do. Instead of saying Unabomber, we can call you the Unaboober." And that was just the beginning of many jests and jokes. My own personal journey with cancer was really quite short compared to the cancer that I've experienced through my life. My husband was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in 1981. My son Josh was 10 months at the time, and my daughter Anisha was 3 years. He was given 1 to 7 years, and that this particular kind of cancer had never been cured. He did tremendously difficult treatments, which required hospitalization and lots of recovery time. He even went so far as to have a bone marrow transplant, and ultimately died of pneumonia. Shortly after that, my muscular dystrophy was diagnosed, and then a year later, my breast cancer was diagnosed at stage 1. I had said to people, close friends, I have this disease, muscular dystrophy, and it's not a secret that I don't want to talk about it. I don't want people coming up to me all the time and asking me how I'm doing. I just want to live normally. I want to be normal. I want to be treated normally. I don't want a constant reminder. And so, but somehow the cancer was different. Somehow, and I don't know, I can't explain why. It started out differently, and it went differently, and it was perfect. Because friends who had come over after the night that I'd gotten the diagnosis said, "What do you want us to do? What can we do?" And I said, "I think tell everybody tomorrow." And that would be Friday at school. "Please tell everybody, and so we don't have to go through this for a week or so." I don't know why I reacted differently to the cancer than I did to the muscular dystrophy. When I tell my story, I say it's the grace of God. And that's my only explanation. I don't know why, other than I was graced. I was given a gift, and I accepted it.
When I first learned of the cancer, I found it really odd to be joking about all of that because it just didn't seem right. But then, realizing who Sandy is and what helps her get through those different kinds of life experiences, and humor is a part of that, it just seemed natural, really, after that.
The conversation I had with God when I got the diagnosis of muscular dystrophy was not funny. It was such a blow. And the thought of being helpless was almost more than I can bear. And I said to God, I could have done anything easier than a crippling disease. I would have rather have had cancer than this disease, than to be crippled and need somebody to help me dress or go to the bathroom and take a bath and get into a car. And then, a year later, almost to the day, when the cancer diagnosis was given, and after the first shock of that, I thought back to that prayer and thought, God, I didn't say and cancer, I said or. And then I had told somebody that, and we laughed about it, and I said, you know, if this is the way this one's going to work, then I'll tell you what, I would rather be married to a wonderful, kind, wealthy individual with no family members than have cancer and muscular dystrophy. And that's when a group of friends planned my wedding during my surgery.
We had taken all kinds of books, magazines, brides magazines, up there to plan Sandy's wedding.
And they were able to give me a whole calendar of events for the next year. The wedding shower and the bachelorette party and the wedding and so on. There wasn't a groom in it, but the whole wedding was being planned.
When we found out about the surgery, there were about, I would guess about 15 of us that got together and decided we were going to go clean Sandy's house, because when this happens, when we go to the hospital, we all want to have these things done.
I'm not a real tidy housekeeper. In fact, my son once came home and the dining room table was cleaned off, and he said, who's coming to dinner? And I said, nobody. And he said, are we moving? No, Josh, I just happened to clean up the table. This is not my heritage. It's not my genetic code to ask for help. My family doesn't do that.
And she later told me that was one of the hardest situations of the entire cancer issue, was having all those people come to her house. And she told me that's the moment she realized how many people cared, and that was hard for her in that house.
When Dave said that he wanted to go with me to the hospital, I said, oh no, you have to take a day off, and I won't be awake, I'll be out of it, and I don't even know if I'm going to be funny. You know, I don't know if when I wake up and are brought back to the room, if it's even any point in anybody being there. And he said, no, I want to come. Again, beginning for me, I said, okay, this is somebody's choice. I didn't need to make it. He was making it, and I felt that I needed to allow him to do that. And again, that was a gift from God, his being there. My family is not funny. They don't laugh. And as dear as they are, they would not have set the same kind of tone. And several friends came to my house and my pastor, and before they got there, I had showered, and in the shower, I'd said goodbye to my breast. I said, you've been a good breast. You've done a fine job of what you were intended to do. You've nursed your babies for 40 months altogether, and you've done a fine job, but now there's something wrong, and we have to go with that. I have to do this, and I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. I'd never been really angry at my body. I felt that my body's done a phenomenal job under some really tough circumstances. It's really come through when I needed it to. So I wasn't angry. I was saddened. And I prayed that I'd be funny when I came out of surgery, because it seemed at this point now people expected that from me. Don't be angry, don't be crazy, don't be crying, be funny. Please, God, let me be funny. So my pastor was there, my sister was there, Dave came, a couple of other friends came, and I had already talked to Pastor Doug about my prayer, and in his prayer he said, and please let Sandy be funny when she wakes up. So then we leave for the hospital, and a friend that worked there came with me, and Dave drove over, and my sister was with me, and we went in and signed in and waited around in the waiting room. It was a little tense. And then they brought us up to the next floor and to be admitted. And the nurse said, Mrs. Welch. And I pulled my friend Susan forward, and I said, this is Mrs. Welch. And Susan goes, I'm not. And I said, please be gentle. She's still in denial. And she goes, oh, Sandy, I can't believe this. So then they have us sit down, and this was so perfect because we're sitting there, there's 4 of us, and the nurse comes over and she says, we're ready to do the final admissions, and you can bring 1 person with you. And Dave leaped up. And my sister was kind of sputtering, like, but. And it was so wonderful because if I'd had to choose, if Joanne had stood up, it would have changed everything for that entire day, but it just flowed.
I figured that she would need somebody along just to kind of play as a foil to her humor, and kind of keep her, sort of keep the joking going, because we're getting closer to when things were going to begin to happen, and help with some of that nervousness. And I figured that her sister, who is wonderful at taking charge and making things happen and getting things done, would jump right in there as well. And I thought, no, I'm going to do it.
Pretty soon they moved me down to a room and asked me to change, and Dave can't come, and then Dave can, and I'm laying in bed and we're talking and chatting, and pretty soon then they have to do something. It must have been blood tests or something, and they pull the curtain.
I was on the outside of the curtains making little faces and doing little weird things with little hand puppets and whatnot, and quacking ducks and wolves and all that sort of stuff.
And so we're laughing, and they're doing something in preparation, but I'm on the bed laughing, and Dave's laughing. Pretty soon they leave, and the curtain opens, and a nurse brings in a pamphlet about the anesthesia. She says, now the anesthesiologist wants you to read this before surgery. I said, I'm not going to read this before surgery. I said, we're on a roll here now. I said, we're too funny. I don't have time for this kind of stuff. And she said, no, he insists. So I said, oh, all right. So I take the pamphlet and I start reading it aloud with feeling. And Dave and I are laughing about this and that and whatnot. So finally she just grabs the pamphlet. She said, you've read enough.
The burly, orderly surgical person who was wheeling her from the pre-op room ready to go down those, stainless steel halls to the surgery room. And I was still with her, and he asked, is this your son? And I think I could probably still hear her ranting and raving as the door was closed and she was going around the corner.
And I'm blustering and muttering and spitting, and I said, oh, he's not my son, he's just a few years younger than I am. And then they wheeled me into the surgery operating room, and my surgeon said later that she said, I have never had anybody talk as much as you did. She said, we had to give you the maximum amount to get you to shut up. And I'm certain that what I was doing was still sputtering about the nurse's comment about Dave being my son. And so even then, even to the moment of blackness, I was able to focus on something other than fear. There was something else to look at. The next day, my pastor came by, and he said to me, he said, Sandy, he said, I really thought it would be a solemn affair in the waiting room when I said that I'd come over and be here when you got out of recovery. He said, but your friends are a lot of fun. And my sister said, yes. And there was entirely too much frivolity, and I had to go home. I had to leave. We just talked about it this summer, and she said, I brought that up to her, and she said, yes. She said, I was so scared. She said, I went home and cried and cried and cried. And so I know that at times I'm somewhat negative about my family and their attitude, that they weren't as joyful and as humorous and not as eager to participate in all the fun. But maybe families can't. Maybe we can't when it's our loved one that's facing it. Maybe it's easier for me to do that. And maybe, and I doubt very much if this were one of my children in this situation, if I would have had such a good time. But then I tell myself, what we must do as a community is each person in that spot needs the opportunity to make a decision how they want to do it. And then we, as a support group, honor that decision, whether it's frivolity, whether it's seriousness, whether it's tears, even anger. We must honor the path that a person wants to go and not try and change it. Telling my students was one of the most difficult tasks I had to do. And I've always believed that it's better to tell children the truth, that to sugarcoat it or to not tell them something to spare them doesn't really work, because they sense the reality, and yet their imagination may be worse than what really is going on. One of the things I fought against was how can you teach an adolescent when you're bald? How can you do that? How can I possibly walk into that classroom on a daily basis with no hair? I wasn't going to get a wig. I'd seen too many people spend the money and then not use them because they're hot and scratchy. What am I going to do? I can't do that. I just can't do it. And then one day, and it was right before Thanksgiving, and I had made the decision to do chemotherapy and struggling with how I was going to manage the classroom. And we were making angels for a project, and I had hot glue gun some hair on one of the little angels and hadn't liked it, and ripped off the fake hair, and it left tufts sticking out. And I started to giggle, and somebody said, "Mrs. Welch, what's so funny?" And I said, I was just looking at this angel. And they said, "Well, what's so funny about it?" And I said, "Let me tell you a story." And once upon a time, there was a teacher. Her name was Mrs. Belch, and she had cancer. And the doctors had recommended that she have chemotherapy, and in the process that she would lose her hair. And she said no, she just can't teach and be bald at the same time. It would be just too disruptive. Well, of course, now they know that Mrs. Belch is truly Mrs. Welch, and they know what I'm trying to say to them. And they, 3 or 4 of them said, don't worry about it. We'll shave our heads." And I laughed, and at that moment, it was okay. If I lost my hair, that was going to be the least of my problems. And I understood that. At that point in time, I understood it. And my head could have said it, but my heart would never have felt that until that moment. And I laughed and I said, better check with the folks before you do that. When people came to the house and helped me, it was a beginning. When Dave, was able to be with me in the hospital on the surgery, it was a beginning. The whole thing was a beginning of a different me. In all of these small little steps created a journey, a phenomenal, extraordinary journey.
Sandy was distinctly unusual from the beginning. She has an odd little smile. When you talk to her, there's always something that's going on. She's always thinking of kind of games that are related to what's going on. She wants to have a full disclosure of everything that's on your mind, and she asks for that information commonly rather joyfully. That's another thing about her that I've seen with other patients, which is that basically, I have this malignancy, I'm going to have to put up with you, and coming here, that's not going to be easy. And so to facilitate this for me so that it's experience that's tolerable, because it's going to be horrible otherwise, then I have to incorporate into this my little program. And part of the little program is a certain amount of me.
And I said, now I have to think about how many days I might miss out of school. He said, probably maybe a day after the treatment. You need to take the day off, maybe a day after. He said, so a lot of people like Thursday, Friday, and they have the weekend to recover. I said, no, we can't do Thursday, Friday. I said, because those are Lady Grizz games, and I wouldn't want to miss those. So we'll have to do my treatments on Monday or Tuesday, so I'll be sure to be recovered for basketball. And he's looking at me like, what are you talking about? Not only is he not a Lady Grizz fan, and he explained in detail why he wasn't, but he couldn't fathom that that was going to be my criteria. And so he went on to explain to me that he didn't care for the Lady Grizz, that he didn't like them for several different reasons. Coach Selvig yelled too much. He only had blonde players. And so I argued a little with him and said, no, that's not the case. But nevertheless, I'm going to go to the games, and I don't want the treatments to interfere. It wasn't planned, but it just happened. Avis said, "I want to go with you," and I said, "There isn't any need, Avis. You can drive afterwards, and I really need to see what it's like before I want any hoopla or any big deal, because I think I'd already sensed that the staff and myself together in this cancer journey were going to make the most of it. I say, I think I just need to kind of see what it's like first, and then we'll know how we can behave." And she said, "Okay." And then about 3 days before the treatment, she said, "I just can't let you go by yourself. It just doesn't feel comfortable." Again, I was able to say, "Okay." Just like when Dave said, "I want to be there," and I said, "Oh, no, you don't need to be." But being able to say, "Okay," when people make that offer, that's a new a new manner for me. And to learn to say, they're making the decision, let it go. You don't have to make it for them. And so I said, okay. And Avis and I talked and laughed and joked. And Avis went out and got food for both of us. And it was all pretty much a 4 or 5 hour experience. And the day ended, and I was at school the next day. And that's when Avis started she said, "I think we should have an escort every time." Made a list, had people sign up. There were more people who wanted to sign up than there were treatments. So they wanted me to ask Dr. Speckert if I could have some additional chemotherapy treatments so no one would feel left out. And he was so surprised at the beginning. He would be like, "What are you talking about?" "Well, there's some people and they really want to come and they can't." And he's just shaking his head. He said, "Well, maybe they could come, with somebody else." I don't think he was prepared at all for the escort service. I don't think that was something that he had envisioned occurring. Well, the hat party occurred shortly after my first chemotherapy treatment because I was told I would lose my hair. That was a given. I may get sick to my stomach, but I would lose my hair. And the promise had been that my hair would start to go after the second treatment. Then the staff had gotten together, and there had been a disagreement that they didn't know where I was. And it just wasn't fair that I could just run around and do this and do that and not let people know where I was or be able to take messages or whatnot. So they had taken up a collection to buy me an answering machine. And originally, the party had been planned just to give me the answering machine so that they could leave messages and I could leave messages. So there's the chemo, and we called it the chemotherapy party, and that was at a local restaurant that had very, very poor service, very slow, took a very long time to get your order, to get your food, and then to get your bill. So they planned it that day, got to everybody, bring a hat, meet us at the restaurant, we'll give her the answering machine, and we'll have a party. And so people came, they brought hats, even individuals that didn't have a hat. Dave, who had just had a new baby, he and his wife had just had their second, they wore Pampers, not unused Pampers, but they wore Pampers. And others wore stockings, and there were all kinds of different things. And then people had made hats during the day, and so I had probably 4 or 5 hats that I could wear. And, we had a great time, a jolly time. And at one point I look around, and Forey and another friend, Lori, are missing, and I said, "Where are they?" And the answering machine's gone also. So I go in search of them, and I walk into the bathroom, the women's bathroom in this restaurant. They're on the floor because it's the only place where there's a plug-in, and they are recording a message on my answering machine. And and one of them is at the toilet, flushing the toilet. They're gagging, pretending that they're vomiting, and saying, "I can't come to the phone right now, gag, gag, flush, flush, because I'm really sick, gag, gag, flush, flush, because of chemotherapy, gag, gag, flush, flush. I'll call you when I can." Well, they are laughing so hard. I start laughing really hard. And then they tell me about the 2 women who had come in while they're making the tape. They said they just came in, they saw us bending down here on the floor, talking into the answering machine, and walked right back out. She said they didn't even stay. So that message was on my answering machine for a couple of days. And
That was disgusting. Sandy loved it.
again, a way to laugh at what was going to happen or what I thought was going to happen. We were going to laugh about it. It wasn't going to be embarrassing or non-mentionable. No way. Everything was going to be right out in the open. When we're leaving, I said to the waitress, and you have to remember this, it was a place that had very slow service, and I just reached my hand over and I said, "Hon, we need to have that bill right away. And would you remember that I have cancer, so you need to hurry on that one." So, and again, we laughed at that. We said, "We're using that cancer one. You use that for everything. There isn't a place you don't go that you don't use the cancer as an excuse for something."
Sandy needed somebody to keep celebrating life with her, so that's what we did. And it was fun. They had trouble getting IV in her arm, and it took like 3 nurses. So the 3rd nurse, I had my sack of goodies, and I gave her the fruit cake. It was a disgusting fruit cake that I really searched for these door prizes. And then the other nurse came up. She had to clean something up. I don't know if it was blood or whatever. And so I reached down, I gave her the canned ham. And pretty soon the nurses are in the back room just laughing and carrying on, and we had a really good time. Dr. Speckert got the Farmer's Almanac because I wanted to give him something really dignified. Yeah, I was trying to get 1st place in the escort. It was not a competition, but Sandy will turn anything into a competition, so the stories got better and better.
When Dr. Speckert said that he didn't like the Lady Grizz, I thought to myself, this man needs to be annoyed, and I'm the person that can do it. And, you know, later on when he said to me, "I can't say anything to you, can I?" I thought, you are going to live to regret this. And I don't know if he regretted it. I think he had a good time, but he was surprised that of all the things that went on about the Lady Grizz. Megan Harrington was a close friend, and she was the point guard for the Lady Grizz, so I had gone through her. And she said, yep, she could get some Lady Grizz, and they could show up for one of my chemotherapy treatments.
You know, going to the chemo treatment before, because she had set up, Dr. Speckert thinks that you're all blonde. He won't go to a game, doesn't want to go to the games, thinks that the coach yells at you. So going in there, I don't know if we necessarily registered that, you know, we're going to a cancer treatment, that, you know, some people don't always get better, and you don't know that Sandy's going to get better. So keeping it on the light side, like she did, setting up, okay, you know, we're playing this joke. We went in there with probably an attitude that they might have appreciated. You know, we were all smiling, joking, having fun in a situation that normally isn't like that. And by Sandy's story, you understand that sometimes that's how people are healed, not only through the chemotherapy and the medication and prayer. There is something to be said about attitude. And, well, if I have this situation, like she said, and if I'm going to suffer, everybody's going to suffer with me. And with her, it's not a bad suffer. It's a, oh my gosh, what's she going to do kind of suffer. So, you know, it was a great experience for me personally as well. Coach Selvig's wife, Janie Selvig, came to treatment with us, and to have her there kind of made it seem more real, that it wasn't just the players that were coming down. You know, the coach's wife was in on it, kind of knew what was going on. We brought some posters in for the clinic, obviously showing some of the big blondes on the team as well as some of the brunettes, and we signed some autographs for some people who were in there. So maybe that day we not only played a joke, but maybe we brought in something new.
And I really think he was speechless, that he didn't know what to say.
Because sometimes when she would do these pranks, I didn't know really quite what to think, because some of them were really fairly outrageous. And one of them was to have them here. But the biggest part of that all was to meet the coach's wife. I mean, she was actually here. And I sort of wondered how much of what I said that she knew. And I suspected that she did understand some of what I had said. It was fun. It was fun. It was kind of a highlight of her treatment, yeah.
To continue going to the games, even though I might not feel 100%, it means that life doesn't have to stop. That because you have cancer doesn't mean that that's it. You're going to be home, you're going to be bald, and you're going to be throwing up. No. You do something else that's added to your agenda, to your schedule. But I was able to continue. I was able to sit in the stands, to enjoy the games. And then I even went to Stanford in the first round of the NCAA. I flew down with the Lady Grizz, and that was an absolute thrill for me. Number one, just being able to do it. To think that back in September when I'd gotten that diagnosis, I would not have pictured myself in March flying to Stanford.
So when we were on the trip, she got a card for Dr. Speckert, and she had each of us sign it. And some of the girls were writing, it's not the same without you here. Wish you could be here. Hope we play well. We dyed our hair blonde. We hope it makes us play better.
When I would return after a treatment, my 6th grade students were always eager to hear what had happened the previous day. And that became kind of a ritual, that I would share whatever silliness, goofiness, laughter, jest, what had ever gone on, that I would immediately tell them when they came in the following day. Then someone, and I don't remember who, said, why can't we go? Can we go too? And I thought, why not? Parents volunteered, and they brought them in groups of 5. So there was a group of 5 who was there when the treatment started, and there was a group of 5 during the middle of the treatment, and there was a group of 5 who came in for the end of the treatment. That particular day, they moved me to a private room for the treatment, just so that the crowd wouldn't be upsetting to the rest of the treatment room. But they weren't. It was a great experience for us all. And again, they came away with not being fearful, that this was something that wasn't scary, but just part of the process.
The idea of having fun in a situation like that, I thought initially was unusual, but it certainly was obvious to me after participating the value of that. And if you know Sandy, Sandy's personality is she's an excitable person, enthusiastic, always happy even through the adversity that she went through. And I guess that was part of the excitement. First we went to breakfast. I think we had balloons for her. We took her to lunch afterwards. We joined her in the room where she was having therapy, and which was sort of entertaining. And I guess those are the things I did. I did not win the contest, by the way.
I had become anemic, and the thought was that was probably because of the chemotherapy. But just to be on the safe side, I was asked to take this stool sample kit home and to follow the directions and return it to the lab. And that way they could guarantee that I wasn't bleeding internally. And I did. I took it home. I read the directions and thought, I don't think so. This is not going to happen. I had almost every indignity, and I was drawing the line. This just wasn't going to happen. So instead, I went around and took pictures, photographs of all of the stools in my life, the footstool and the bar stool and the stool I sit on at school and an antique stool, and wrote on the back describing them, tucked them into the kit, sent it off to the lab, and when I went to see Dr. Speckert for my next visit, he very dryly handed them back to me and said, I think you want to save these. The very last treatment were the 2 secretaries, Vicki and Donna, and if anyone has ever taught, has ever worked in schools, you know that the secretaries really run the school. So to have both of these individuals out of the building on one day was pretty scary for the school district and wonderful for me. They arrived fully garbed and in force. They had Donna's van, and they were dressed as butterflies. And they had bags and bags of goodies to give away because they were determined to win the best escort contest, because it had been said then that the people at the cancer center would vote. So, they had a balloon, a butterfly balloon, and they took me to the Old Town Cafe for breakfast. And Daisy, who had been a waitress through the whole thing, had brought a glass of bubbly grape juice as a celebration of my last treatment. And they had hoped to get a convertible to drive through town, but that hadn't worked out.
And I went to Sandy and I said, okay, I says, you need to tell me all your chaperones and your escorts and what they did. Still, she told me, and I says, well, is there something that I could get for you? Since it's your last one, we need to have a celebration. And she says, well, you know, she says, I haven't had a brass band. And so I went to the music teacher, Mr. Ives, and I said, Jonathan, what about if we take the school band? And he says, he was all for it. Well, because it wasn't a school function, we weren't able to. And so the next best thing I could come up with was some people who met us at Dr. Speckert's office. At that time, there was a young man in Sandy's classroom whose older brother played bagpipes. He was a high school student. And I knew some people here in Lolo that also played bagpipes. One of our moms was one of the nurses there, and I'd asked Randy, you know, I told her what we wanted to do, and I asked her if she would ask Dr. Speckert if this would be appropriate. Well, she was all excited. She goes, oh, it would be lovely. Well, Dr. Speckert, being, you know, kind of stiff, he said no, because that would, you know, it might cause the other patients, you know, some discomfort. And I says, could we do it in the parking lot? And they agreed. So we had 3 people at the parking lot in Dr. Speckert's parking lot.
People came to the windows, looked and stared and waved. And
we had the chemo queen come into the chemo room. She was dressed in a get-up, just a silk satin gown, and she had this crown with jewels from Kmart, and she had a magic wand that lit up and had colored lights in it, star on the end. She bounced around that chemo room and blessed everybody. And
the one nurse she had wasn't able to get the IV needle started, and she was getting frustrated, and Sandy was on the verge, I think, of panic, and she was upset because the nurse had told her that if it didn't go in, she was going to have to come back, and Sandy wasn't prepared for that. She didn't want to. Well, the young girl that came out to do the last IV was a girl that had gone to school here, and who had been one of Sandy's students at one time.
so the chemo queen blessed the needle and sang a little jingle or something and bounced around there, and the needle slipped right in. I like to think the chemo queen had a little magic.
And we handed Dr. Speckert his tally sheet or his ballot of some sort to decide who was the best chaperone. And Dr. Speckert said, well, why should I vote you the best? And I said, because we're the last ones, and you don't have to put up with this anymore. Well, of course, we won.
now, at the radiation center, there's no hoopla going on, and I was warned about it ahead of time. I was told, I've read your chart, and I've read about all of the circus things that have been going on. That's not going to happen here. And everything is in 15-minute blocks. You come in. Honestly, I would leave my house, have my treatment, and be back at my home in 33 minutes. There was no marching band, no Mr. Potato Head. And I understood that. And I didn't ask anybody to go with me. It was too quick. I mean, there was no point. But it was so cold. And I said to her after about the 3rd treatment, I had to have 33. I said, I need this to be more lighthearted. I counted the words that were said between us. And I think this one day there were like 4 words that I said that were answers to questions. Otherwise, nothing else was said. Not hello, how are you, what kind of day is it out there, we don't have any windows in here, nothing. And she said to me, cancer's a very serious business. And I also asked her to call me Sandy rather than Mrs. Welch, and she said she wasn't raised that way. Now, I didn't, but I wished I would have said, you were raised to be rude? Because I'm making a request here. You see the doctor one week, you see a nurse another week as a checkup. So my first week, I see the nurse, and she asked me, how are things going? And I burst into tears. She said, what's the matter? I said, I'm not having any fun. She said, what do you mean? I said, it's not fun here. I don't think I can do this. And I explained what had happened. Well, the technician never called me Mrs. Welch again. She didn't call me Sandy either. She didn't call me anything. The second technician tried to be friendlier, tried to carry on some little conversations, and so we got it a little bit lighter. And then at the first of the month, it changed to a new technician who was somebody who did want to laugh, and so we laughed. We didn't take any time. I was still there 15 minutes, but it made all the difference in the world. Control is real important under those situations. Not control that's going to hurt others, but to have to say about this is what I'm going to do and this is what I need. Now, you people, please do that. And I'm not saying to do it aggressively and to make demands and yell and scream or whatnot, but just make a decision. Decide what you need for yourself to be as full a person as you can be, that you're more than just a disease. I'm Sandy. I'm Sandy the teacher. I'm Sandy the humorist. I'm Sandy the person who can be obnoxious and annoying. One time in a class, this woman said to me, you really are annoying. And I said, I know, and you're not the first one to tell me.
Well, I think that humor is extremely important with everything. And cancer treatment becomes important because when people enter cancer treatment part of their life, then they're very nervous and they're compromised, and much of their life changes with regard to the focus and the fears that they have as they encounter malignancy within themselves and a treatment program. So the capacity then to endure that and to have reasonable equanimity as they go about their life is significantly influenced by a proper sense of humor.
I was towards the end of the chemotherapy in April. And, you know, I hadn't lost my hair. It had thinned, but I had never had to shave it. The kids were a little disappointed at school, but they were living with it. I had never been sick to my stomach, but I had some bouts of anemia, was pretty worn out, pretty tired. Went to school every day except for treatment, was pretty much dragging home and not getting too much else done. And my daughter, who was in college, her freshman year of college, came to me and said, Mom, I think you should get a puppy. And I said, I don't think so. I mean, truly, who in their right mind would be going through chemotherapy, teaching, living alone, and get a puppy? I mean, that isn't the best time. But I did go over to see the new baby. And Anisha brought in the puppy. And she said, oh, Mom, why don't you hold the puppy? And he curled right up, and he snuggled right under my neck. And I loved him. And if I had been going out to buy a dog, I would have bought a lighter colored, I would have bought a female, and I would have bought one with a square head. And Laddie is dark, dark red. Almost, some people think he's a Irish setter. He has the longer head. He's a male, but he was meant for me. That pup would lay beside me. I'd drag myself home, and he would lay beside me, and I'd dangle my hand down off the couch, and he would just lick my hand. And he waited till I felt better. And he waited all summer when I went through radiation, and that following year when I was okay, but I actually felt worse than I had the year before. I had a residual arthritis, and my knees hurt, and my ankles hurt, and my feet hurt. They were like clubs. I found that I stood all day at work because it hurt so to stand up. I could sit down, but the standing up was so painful, and the first few steps I took were so hurtful. I stood the whole day, and I was exhausted and kind of low. I was kind of depressed that I had worked so hard and being positive and not anxious, and now it's all over and I hurt. But you have to walk your dog. I mean, this pup who had laid beside me deserved more than just to continue laying beside me. And so I forced myself to walk. And I literally walked out the pain. First it went out of my ankles, and then or my knees, and then my ankles, and then my feet. I'm a person who was always considered the weakling. Always, Sandy's not very athletic, or Sandy's kind of weak, or Sandy's kind of frail. Well, now we know it was the muscular dystrophy. But I was this individual that didn't do physical things. And I'm now walking my dog every day. And then by the following summer, I'm walking my dog every day, and sometimes twice a day, and I'm doing hills. I'm doing Patty Canyon, and I'm doing Blue Mountain. And I'm out there all by myself with my dog. I don't have to wait for somebody else to walk with me. I walk at night, I walk in the rain, I walk in the sleet, in the mud, even on ice. That's one thing that might deter me, but I've found that I can walk even on ice. I walk my dog every day. And in the process, I have never felt better in my entire life. No, I wasn't to diet. I gained quite a bit of weight during chemotherapy. Not a good idea to diet, because if I did a diet, I might lose muscle. And that wouldn't be good for the MD. But it's not good to weigh more, because whatever muscle you have is having to work harder. I lost weight by walking. I lost weight because I crave fruit. My lifestyle completely changed because of that dog. Dr. Speckert said, "Now what do you attribute to your good health? That you're feeling so good?" I said, "My dog." And he said, "No, really." I said, "Really? My dog. If I hadn't had Laddie Grizz, I'd be alive today. I don't have any doubts about that, but I wouldn't be living." I'm out there. I'm out in Patty Canyon, those trails, as soon as the snow's off. I see every flower that blooms, and I am there till the snow comes again, and I see every flower go. I know everything that's out there, and I see it all. I don't just walk. I feel everything. And this is an overused phrase, and I don't particularly like it, but take time to smell the roses. But I do. I take time to do everything. The air's fresher and crisper and cleaner, and I'm out there with my dog in the best weather and the worst weather. I'm there. I used to dread winter, just dread it. Oh, what if the pipes freeze or the car doesn't start? Cancer's changed that. Cancer and the dog, so what? You know, the pipes will thaw, the car will start, you'll get to work. Your dog is going to be in the home waiting for you when you get there. You'll be fine. He has absolutely changed my life. I have a second dog. His name's Ira, and he's also a golden retriever. He's just on loan. Laddie was so good for my health that almost 2 years ago, when somebody approached me about being a foster parent for a service dog, I said, sure. He's not a guide dog, and he's not a hearing impaired dog. He's going to work with someone with special abilities, probably someone in a wheelchair. One of the things I found out about the comparison of my husband having cancer and my own cancer experience is it's far easier to be the cancer patient than it is to be the support of the person who is ill. That was so difficult, and with my cancer I had control of it. I got to do what I wanted to do. But as a support person, you don't get to make choices. You don't get to ask the questions. You don't get to let down. And it is far more difficult than it was to be the patient. But if there would be one thing from anybody seeing this, is to understand how wonderful people are and how great people have been to me and how much they've enhanced my life. Any of these fun things, any of these stories, any of these great memories, any of this feeling of this incredible journey could not have been done without all these other people. I could not have done it alone. And that, I know that absolutely. I may not have been able to do it if it had been my son or my daughter, and I understand that. But the people that were there with me, that hung in with me, you know, when bad things happen, sometimes you can count on 3, 4 people. I had at least 20. And I have an incredibly rich life, but it's because of the people around me. I have truly been blessed. And another thing I caution people about who will hear my story and say, oh, if you have the right attitude, then you don't get sick, you don't lose your hair, you don't die. And that's wrong. That puts a burden on the person who has the disease that somehow I lost my hair so I didn't have the right attitude. I'm throwing up all the time so I didn't have the right attitude. My cancer isn't cured, I'm going to die. I must not have had the right attitude. And that's not true. There are people who lose their hair, who get sick to their stomach and die, who have absolutely marvelous attitudes. The only guarantee that I've had is that I had a good time. But I could have been angry and still not lost my hair. My only guarantee is I had a great time. I am so fortunate. The teaching career, the living in Montana. I mean, all of those things contribute to my being me. But I'm not unusual. No, I've been real fortunate.